glad to see young guys out here in the conference hall. Oops, I forgot my sheet of paper, my cheat sheet. That's my cheat sheet. So, while I was coming here, toying with the ideas of what I'm going to put across to you, all that got, not all, but part of it got washed away by what I heard from Major Arya and Captain Tyagi. So Major Arya said a very interesting thing. Entropy is essential, and sensitivity to issues is essential. And also that a leader needs to take the lead, take risks. Very true. And Professor Tyagi, of course, spoke about commune friends. I have much to say on that, but before that, I'll talk generally about national security and about the security that you guys deal with, the kind of security that you guys would be dealing with. And subsequently, I'll be talking about how we deal with human rights in the National Human Rights Commission. So national security basically is a very large issue. It's a large issue because it deals with large number of people and large geographical areas. It deals with issues that impact over a larger time horizon. But on the other hand, human rights deal with individuals. They deal with now and here. They deal with a very limited, microscopic, as compared to the national security issues. They deal with an individual at this point of time, at this place, while the national security issues are larger. So national security issues would be, say, for instance, left-wing extremism, or insurgency in the Northeast, or terrorism in J&K, or, as Major Arya mentioned, the war in Ukraine and in Israel. So national security deals with those kind of issues. But while dealing with national security, we are ultimately dealing with humans. So a few years back, when the ISIS issue was prominent, problems arose even in our country. What kind of problems? Youngsters of a particular community were getting motivated. They were getting motivated to join the ISIS. Now, from a national security perspective, it was an extremely serious situation. And these kids who were getting motivated were not the uneducated ones. They were not the poor ones. They were educated guys. They were guys who were gainfully employed. They were guys in very respectable professions. They were getting educated. And they were getting educated at different levels. So some would merely confine themselves to browsing the net, browsing those specific channels to know what's happening, and to express sympathies silently on those issues. Some others would talk about them among their colleagues. Some others would go a step beyond and also try and convert their colleagues and friends and family. Some others would go still beyond. They would establish communications with those who figured in these channels as good leaders of the ISIS. Some even went beyond and offered their services. And services were of a different kind. But then, we found that from several countries, thousands of these boys had gone to the Middle East for the war that ISIS was fighting. From our perspective, the issue was massive. Nearly 20% of our population belonged to that community. We wanted to insulate the community from the ISIS. We wanted to protect the interests of the community and of those individuals at the same time, deal with national security issues. Thousands of such boys from even small countries like Maldives went to Middle East. But we evolved a plan how to go about doing it. And the methods that we follow in several countries, we checked on them. We evolved our own scheme, whereunder we involved the community, we involved the community leaders. We realized that leaders of the community did not want their children to go astray. They felt that this was going astray. We capitalized on that feeling. We involved the community leaders, entered into dialogues with them. They identified their own people. This boy is acting strange. This boy is sitting 20 hours a day on his laptop and gets worked up on different issues. He's acting strange. There's something wrong. Look into that. And then once we found those boys, we didn't adopt a penal approach. We adopted a community approach. We involved the community in diluting their ideological preferences, in divesting them of their aggressive thoughts. And in course of time, this experiment succeeded such that from India, despite having over 250 million persons of that community, only about 100 persons went to Syria. That's all. Another 100 odd guys, they got quite motivated, but then we were able to prevent them before they could really turn aggressors, before they could really resort to violent actions within the country. And of those 100 also who had gone abroad, there were about 20% of those who had gone, who were already there in some third countries, maybe working in Oman, Saudi Arabia, UAE, or elsewhere, where they got ideologically indoctrinated and went to Syria, while 80% of them had gone from India. So the fact remains that we were able to protect the rights of the community and that of these youngsters by evolving an approach which took into account the community factors, the society, of hand-holding these kids, of de-radicalizing them, or even counter-radicalizing them, such that they remain within the bounds of national interests and do not pose a threat to national security. But so similarly, such kinds of problems abound where conflict between national security and individual human rights do drop in. Say, for a simple example, on 22nd of January, a lot of people would head to Ayodhya for that ceremony. Now, there'll be a lot of VIPs, there'll be a lot of restrictions, traffic restrictions, restrictions on movement of people, and so on and so forth. Now, what if an ambulance carrying an injured person or person who's ill comes through and his vehicle gets intercepted or stopped by the police persons because there is a vehicle movement of some VIPs? So what police has started doing now over a period of time, they've also got conditioned to these responses, and they create a green corridor. So specific instructions are issued that where there's a crisis situation, even if there is a VIP movement, then an escort party would take their ambulance through an alternate route to the place of destination. So these are the different ways in which one handles these issues. As security professionals, you would be also facing dilemmas. Dilemma is like, as security professionals, it is your duty to doubt. Your actions are impelled by this duty to doubt. You doubt the people, that is why you check, that's why you have preventive measures, whether they are physical security measures, personal security measures, or information security measures. But that duty to doubt conceptually runs counter to the interests of a human being, runs counter to the human rights. So, while discharging your functions, you need to remember that your duty to doubt does not transgress into violations of the human rights. For instance, a simple function like access control. Many of you who are in physical security jobs, you would be exercising access to control. access control. So in access control, you would have physical barriers, you may also have a system of passes or some such thing, and other measures to control access. So in order to prevent access control impinging on the human rights, you would need to have very explicit instructions to your people on how this access control functions, why it functions, and what kind of measures they need to take in order to fall in line. So you are within your bounds, you are within your duties to adopt certain measures to regulate access control, to regulate the movement of people. Maybe you have premises in which certain areas are restricted entry as opposed to other areas with freer entry. So you have the responsibility and the duty to regulate access control in these different places in different manners. The point is that once you educate the people, your people on that, or those who are visitors on that, it would serve to protect their interests. There are also industries now where Government of India, for instance, is outsourcing a lot of its defense acquisitions or even productions in the private sector. So there would be private sector industries which would be privy to defense requirements. Now these defense requirements have immense potential from the perspective of national security. For instance, if I know how many snow jackets I'm buying, if the enemy knows how many snow jackets one is buying of a certain order, one would know how many people I'm deploying at certain heights. These kind of inferences can be drawn. Similarly for the other equipment. Alternately, there could also be equipments where there is an IPR issue associated. So government may be passing on drawings and production processes to you, and that private entity would be manufacturing. Consequently, the information security, personnel security, access control, and all those kind of measures you would need to adopt. Here, the normal human rights would not be impacted, but the government's national security measures you need to factor that in your security preparedness and planning. In information security particularly, some issues of human rights would figure in. So for instance, you may get information about a cyber incident having compromised your company's servers. Now that cyber incident, if it were to get known in the public, it may impact the standing of your company, maybe even the share price of your company. So you would be reticent and reluctant in sharing that information with anyone. But at the same time, the law would maintain that you need to share it with the certain or with other bodies. You would need to strike that balance. You would need to conform to the law, because that is related to a larger issue of cyber security. A private discom may be distributing electricity in a particular area, its server gets impacted, thereby affecting electric supply to people. Now, the company may not be wanting to say what kind of cyber incident has happened. As a security professional, maybe you are privy to that information. But then your lawful duties would be that you need to inform the government about what has happened, because a similar incident, it's a similar kind of perpetrator of that incident. So similar malware may be there in other, may impact some other similar installations or even different installations. So government would need to keep a track of these kind of things. Also, as some of you would be having private security agencies, in these private security agencies, you would be dealing with personnel. Now, when dealing with personnel, there is a whole gamut of laws, international conventions, domestic laws, as also conceptually human right related issues. So, for instance, issues would be sexual harassment at workplace. What to do? So, there's a law on the subject. You need to have, big companies need to have an internal complaints committee which looks into complaints of those matters. You should not be suppressing that. Or, for instance, an employee wants to go on maternity leave. So the law provides maternity leave. So if a woman has worked 80 days prior to her scheduled date of delivery in that company, she's entitled to maternity leave. There is no way that the company can deny it. It relates to not only a statutory right, it's a human right. Because the lady is serving not a personal function of delivering a child, but a social function also. If maternity leaves were not to be granted to ladies, then perhaps they would choose not to have kids. They would work. And if they were not to have kids, it would adversely impact the society. So consequently, maternity benefit is an important thing. The other aspect is that there are rights of the unborn child. The rights of the unborn child should not be impacted. For instance, now 8 weeks after delivery, you can't force a woman to come to work. No way. The law prohibits that. Plus, you have to pay her wages for that period. So you need to be conscious about these rights of people. Or, say, hours of work per week. There are international conventions on this subject. On maternity leave, also international convention. On sexual harassment at place, also international convention besides domestic laws. So, number of hours per week. Or you would be shifting duties of your personal. Maybe 12 hours followed by a day off. Or maybe the usual 8-hour shift. Maybe 10 hours followed by 10-hour gap, then another 10-hour, and then 1-day gap. Something like that. But the point is that within a week, you have to have only that many amount of works that you can get out of that person. Alternately, you should pay him extra. Plus, you need to provide him physical facilities such that his right to dignity and right to life is maintained. Also, now I would go on to some issues that we deal with in the National Human Rights Commission. These kind of things you may not have heard of, so I thought I'll speak about them. We got a complaint about a private company, a big company, having employed half a dozen transgender persons. They went out of their way, they employed them from Kolkata for work elsewhere. So these transgender persons, they relocated from Kolkata to this elsewhere location. When they went to the elsewhere location, by then they'd had their sex changed. So consequently, they were in the process of getting their identity documents changed. It's a big thing for transgender persons because if they've changed their sex from A to B, they change their name, all their documents would need a change. It's a big thing, that identity certificate. Consequently, the law prescribes, and also international conventions prescribe, that their rights need to be protected. They need to get equal treatment. So these guys, they needed a certificate that they are transgenders. The law prescribes that the local district administration would, on application, and of course, on seeing the relevant proofs, provide them that identity certificate. Now this employer, this big company who had hired them, wanted those documents for their own record, their identity certificate. But this district administration did not issue them. We issued them a notice, no reply, a reminder, no reply, we summoned them. The officer came. He had not read the law. He had not read the law. Not only that, he was insensitive. He was insensitive to the plight of those transgenders. The transgenders had highlighted the law to them. Still, he had not read them. And apparently, he was not reading newspapers and Supreme Court judgments on the subject either. So we've imposed a penalty on that government. They're supposed to pay compensation to those transgenders for not having issued an identity certificate within 1 month. The district administration, of course, took the plea that you have to have minimum 1 year of residence for them to be able to give a proof of identity. But the law prescribes otherwise. The employer was very, very considerate, and the employer continued their employment when we intervened. But these kind of issues you could come up with. There is another issue which keeps coming up in our case to us, NHRC, is about industrial accidents and apathy of the employers in providing adequate compensation. So there's an Employees Compensation Act, earlier known as the Workmen's Compensation Act. It has provisions whereunder if a person suffers a disability or gets injured during work, discharge of work, then the employer has certain responsibilities. Not only that, there is also provision for lifelong pension in case of certain amounts of disabilities, etc. We find employers fudging their records or not giving due relevance to this. We also get complaints about people, employers, not posting the deductions made towards EPF and ESI, etc., in the employee's account, or having opened the account, subsequently not servicing that regularly, delaying in that. And when the person is quitting the job, not following the Gratuity Act and these provisions. Immense amount of complaints on that. Being employers, you need to realize that there are international conventions on this, to which India is a signatory, several ILO conventions. There are also significant amount of domestic laws which are sufficiently explanatory on this subject, and employees' rights need to be protected. I'll come to another subject, rights of, a lot of you are students, so recently we came across some cases involving students. In one case, there was a prominent national university, figuring among the top 5 or 6, prominent national university which had not issued degrees to their student for 8 years. 8 years. So this guy complained. We sought a report from the local government. Local government said, oh, these are the letters that we've written to the university, they've not issued. The university in their response said, and a very insensitive response, they said, okay, we received this letter, and now we received this letter. Soon as we received the first reminder, we've issued the degree certificate. So one didn't even wait for the second reminder. That's insensitive. For 8 years, they sat on it, waited for a first reminder to come before they issued the degree. They, of course, adduced other reasons also, like COVID, 2 years, and convocation not being held, and so on and so forth. Now, we've ordered compensation in that case. The people in authority cannot be insensitive to the rights of those whose lives they impact. They have to be sensitive to them. They owe a responsibility to them. Similarly, we came across several cases, hundreds of cases, where medical students, medical interns complained that they are not being given stipend as per regulations of the erstwhile Medical Council of India, or now the National Medical Commission. The university said that yes, we've ordered, and they issued a circular to all the self-financed medical colleges saying you better give this stipend as the prescribed rate. Alternately, we'll take strict action against you. The state government threw up its hands, said, no, not our job. We don't have any regulatory control over these colleges. The National Medical Commission said, oh yes, we framed the regulations, but then these are only advisory in nature, and it's the discretion of the concerned authority in the state to follow them or not. This is contrary to Supreme Court rulings which have held that the Medical Council of India or the National Medical Commission has the constitutional power to issue regulations under its act, and the regulations that they have issued are in conformity with the act. Hence, they have the force of law. So it's not a question of being advisory. The university, after we reminded, issued another circular to the colleges saying, yes, you should pay stipend, otherwise we'll take strict action. Finally, when the colleges did not pay, we asked the university to take action. So university threw up its hand. So it said, okay, our last direction was from the academic council. Now, we've put up the matter to the Senate, which is the highest decision-making body of the university, and the Senate has said that the university has no powers to take action against the delinquent self-financed medical colleges. So state government says, we have no powers, university says, we have no powers, and National Medical Commission says, oh, it's only advisory in nature. So what do those students do? Finally, they've also gone to the court, they've gone to the High Court and taken a stay on the likely coercive action by the university. So we've also become a party in the case. The thing is still work in progress. So we are pursuing that matter. I'm sure we'll succeed. In a similar case, where we were not involved, in a similar case, the Army Medical College in Dholakuam, Army Medical College had some student who went to the Supreme Court here in a writ petition, complaining that they were not getting stipends. The Army Medical College in its replies responded, oh, it's a private medical college, it's funded, it's a welfare measure for children of the Army, and there's no government involvement in it. Consequently, we are unable to pay because it's a charitable institution. And moreover, the fees does not factor in the stipend. Similar such arguments they adduced in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, in its interim order, brushed aside these arguments and said, no, since the NMC, National Medical Commission regulations say that stipend has to be paid, well, they have to be paid. So, in the interim order, the Supreme Court said they have to be paid at such and such rate. They took some Delhi Medical College rate of the government. They said at this rate, this be paid till the time the matter gets decided. This order is of September 2023. The case is again coming up in mid-March, where a call would be taken in the Supreme Court on that subject. So these are interesting subjects because you make a difference to the lives of people, hundreds of people, particularly students. The young guys, it's necessary to impact them because it shapes their value systems. The more adversely they get impacted in their young age, the more they view things differently when they get senior. But I'll tell you another interesting case. And this one is such that we were able to make reparations, we were able to give compensation to victims, which it would have been difficult for the court to handle. So you guys may have heard of Veerappan. Veerappan was that mustachioed guy who figured a lot about 10 years back in magazines and newspapers as the brigand, as the one who stole forest produce, who was a bandit, who was a dacoit, so on and so forth. And his area of dominance was the forest area between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So the forces of Tamil Nadu and the forces of Karnataka, neither of the two forces were able to control them. When an incident would happen, the Karnataka force would say, oh, that happened in Tamil Nadu. The Tamil Nadu guy would say, no, that happened in Karnataka. Who would walk 10 kilometers in the jungle to ascertain where exactly the incident happened? The different state governments for several years tried out different measures to control Veerappan, but they failed. Finally, they decided on one measure, okay, let's join hands. Both Karnataka and Tamil Nadu state government joined hands. They created a joint force. So Tamil Nadu police gave some people, the Karnataka government gave some people. They came under the common leadership of Mr. Vijay Kumar, who was then an Inspector General of Police. Now he's advisor in the Ministry of Home Affairs. He was commanding the joint force of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. And this joint force skirted the forested area. Ultimately, they were able to bring the situation under control, and Veerappan was also neutralized. Simultaneously, a spate of complaints came to NHRC and other organs about alleged atrocities by this force. The complaints related to illegal detention, violation of one's dignity, rape, molestation, rude behavior, so on and so forth, torture, all kinds of complaints. So NHRC also received a lot of complaints. This was several years back, but I recall having read this old file. We issued notice to the government of Tamil Nadu and to the government of Karnataka. So both said, oh, this is not, we mentioned the list of incidents. They said, no, this didn't happen in my jurisdiction. The other state government also said, no, not in my jurisdiction. This perhaps happened in the neighboring state's jurisdiction. So both of them washed their hands off. So we have an investigation wing, an independent investigation wing headed by a Director General rank officer. We sent him to inquire. Also, we appointed a commission, a retired High Court judge. We requested him to go and visit the spot of some of these alleged crimes and ascertain the veracity of the allegations. He visited those spots, some of them, about a dozen of them, and he furnished his report to us saying that in such and such incident, there is apparent truth and such kind of evidence is there. So based on that, we again issued notice to both the state governments, look, these incidents have happened. So again, the state government said, not in my jurisdiction, this happened in the other jurisdiction. So then we called both the chief secretaries over. We said, the fact that there are victims is not in dispute. So what is in dispute? The dispute is, which force was the perpetrator of that brutality? And where did that brutality occur? Where did that violation of human rights occur? To be able to do that in a criminal court of law would be a stupendous task, because you would have examination in chief, witnesses, cross-examination, etc. It could go on for decades. The victims would not have reparations. So we called the chief secretaries and said, okay, look, you agree with the victims, you agree with that this offense has been committed. Maybe instead of 10, you agree with 8 of them. But big deal. There are some victims, on that there is no doubt. The only doubt is on the place of occurrence and on the perpetrator. Because Karnataka police would say, oh, this Tamil Nadu police guy must have done this. Tamil Nadu police guy would say, oh no, Karnataka police guy would have done that. So finally, when we asked the chief secretaries to mull over this issue and to do something about it, ultimately, our nudging them brought out the solution. So both agreed that they would compensate the resident of their jurisdiction, regardless of where the offense occurred or who was the perpetrator of that offense. So if the person is staying within that jurisdiction, if a person is staying in the jurisdiction of Karnataka state, the Karnataka state would do the reparations and provide compensation, while the person, the victim, staying in the Tamil Nadu jurisdiction would be provided compensation by the Tamil Nadu government. Now, from our perspective, that was a good solution, because we were able to provide reparations, we were able to provide compensation to the victims, which otherwise would have taken several years if it had gone to a criminal court. So while some of the cases did go to criminal court for penal provisions also against the officers and others, but from the perspective of the victim and those whose human rights had been violated, some amount of monetary compensation made their life easier. So friends, since you are all in decision-making positions and you would be acquiring seniority and maybe occupying your boss's chair in course of time, as Captain Tyagi said, you need to look at issues with sensitivity. People are individuals. While you may have a larger canvas of looking at security, but the constraint is the human rights of the individuals whom you are working with. I wish you guys all the best in your career. Thank you.